I went to the largest liquor store in Boulder, asked if they had any Czech Dark Lagers, and this was it. One choice. So they aren't super common, but if you can find one pulled fresh from a side pull faucet, you won't forget it. This style is rich and malty, and the best ones have a super interesting and complex flavor profile. Like most styles, the secret here is balance. It can be toasty, chocolatey, fruity, and even a little hoppy, but only in balance. And even though the parameters are fairly wide-ranging, some choices are pretty much automatic. The water is soft. The malt is pilsner, some kind of crystal, and something roasted. The hops are Saaz, and the yeast is a super clean fermenting lager yeast. Now, let's make some beer. For this beer, I'm starting with some reverse osmosis water, and I'm building a pretty soft water profile by adding some gypsum, calcium chloride, Epsom salt, canning salt, baking soda, and chalk. Since this is characteristic to the beer style, it's not something that you want to skip. At the very least, cut your water source with some RO or spring water to soften it up. For the grain bill, I'm using some locally malted grains from Proximity Malt. I have 48% Pilsner, 24% biscuit, 16% Vienna, 6% chocolate, and 6% chocolate wheat. For now, I'll leave the roasted malts out and we'll mash in with everything else starting at 122 Fahrenheit or 50 Celsius. Let's get it going. I'll keep mashing this in until everything is nice and saturated, and then I'll let it rest for 10 minutes before increasing the temperature to 140 Fahrenheit or 60 Celsius and starting to recirculate the wort through the system. After 30 minutes at 140, we're heading up to 158 Fahrenheit or 70 Celsius for another 30 minutes, and that will complete a pretty common step mash that's mentioned in John Palmer's How to Brew. And if you're wondering why I'd spend the time and effort performing a step mash, here's why. Mashing grains during the brewing process allows the brewer to extract sugars and other compounds from the grains that are needed to make beer. Enzymes from the malt are activated at certain temperatures, and they break complex molecules like proteins and starches into smaller pieces that are potentially more consumable by the yeast during fermentation. But not all malts are created equal. Some malts are only slightly modified during the malting process, which means the enzymes needed to simplify starches into sugars and the amino acids needed for a healthy fermentation are still locked within the cell walls of the grains. For these malts, performing a step mash is a no-brainer and will be required to break everything down. On the other hand, most modern malts are fully modified and everything that's needed to create a healthy fermentation is readily available. For these malts, a step mash isn't required, but it'd be a huge mistake to leave it at that. I see this in forums all the time. Someone mentions wanting to try a step mash and someone else immediately tells them not to waste their time because modern malts are fully modified. But they're overlooking some hidden potential. First, by performing a step mash, you're almost always extending the length of the mash, and that extra time alone is enough to increase your efficiency and create a more fermentable wort. Beers that haven't been fermented all the way are strangely sweet and much more likely to develop off flavors and other problems once they're packaged. Not only can the extra time increase your efficiency, but it can also create important flavor differences. When the sweet malt makes contact with your heat source, the Maillard reaction browns the sugars and creates dimension within the malt flavors. But the biggest reason to perform a step mash is so you can take full advantage of the enzymes present in your fully modified malt. The modern malting process does us some favors, but it's up to the brewer to nail the pH and create a good mix of sugars, amino acids, and more to fuel a healthy fermentation. So if you want more efficiency, more dimension, and overall more control, think of step mashing as an easy hack to get you there. After 30 minutes at our final mash temperature, I'm adding all of the dark malts, stirring everything in, and it's time to yank these grains and get our boil started. We're up to a full boil and it's time for the first hop addition. Here's 28 grams of Saaz and our 60-minute boil timer starts now. We've got 15 minutes left in the boil and it's time for another hop addition. Here's 7 more grams of Saaz, bringing us up to about 27 total IBUs. I'm also adding 1 Whirlfloc tablet and some yeast nutrient. And just like that, it's time to chill this thing down and get ready for fermentation. All right, we're oxygenated and almost down to the target fermentation temperature of 54 Fahrenheit or about 12 Celsius. For this beer, I'm going with Imperial Harvest, which should give us a super clean beer. To keep the temperature where I want it, I'm using the Brewbuilt Ice Master 2 glycol chiller, which was provided to me at wholesale cost by More Beer, and the Anvil cooling system provided by Anvil. The jury is still out, but so far I'm really enjoying this chiller and the control it gives me during fermentation. Now, let's see how this beer turned out. Alright, remember Czech Dark Lagers need to be rich and malty with balanced and complex flavors. On paper, mine shoots right down the middle, coming in at 5% ABV with 27 IBUs and an SRM of 31. Visually, this thing is dark brown and fairly cloudy with a lasting tan head. The aroma is strong and dominated with rich malt, chocolate, and dried fruit. And the flavor starts with some banana and raisin bread and then moves into complex chocolatey malt and finishes with some subtle bitterness. I think I did it. This is an awesome beer. And with the National Homebrew Competition right around the corner, this might be one of my submissions. Let me know in the comments what you think about step mashing and check out the description for links to my references. My name's Dan, this is Hops and Gnarly. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you again soon.